Fanfic show, as read by Zugador994.
Yes, thank you.
Heat rose over the desert and drew sweat from the pores of the young man of 21 years. Today was his birthday. Not that he hadn't been drinking heavily from a much younger age, despite laws, but back home in Boston, alcohol was all too easily obtainable. Today, however, a good drink wasn't all he was wishing for. No, he desperately craved something else this fine morning. Something he hadn't been craving for all too long in this lonely but adequately scenic stretch of the Egyptian desert, surrounded by nothing but blood and war and pyramids and hairy older men of various ethnicities. Something that could not be so easily obtained as a fresh beer.
He's reading this.
His body burned for it every day, the yearning and desire increasing steadily as his still youthful hormones raged from so much time spent without. Oh God, how he craved it. He could almost imagine it as he stood under the hot morning sun in the sweltering heat. That familiar sweetness wet and dripping down his lips. The touch of curvy round length beneath his hands, soft yet firm and so delightful, so seductive. He wanted it, and he wanted it now. Fuck, I want some fucking pancakes! He desperately cried to the heavens above. But how to get those fluffy golden treats out here in a desert in the middle of nowhere? His nearby home base had no such items to create pancakes in the stock of supplies. Anything outside of standard rations and coffee were considered luxuries and unnecessary. The men were lucky they got shipments of food and drink at all. The natives in closest distance to the battlefield had no such desire for things either, in any of their restaurants or small side stands. And if they had obtained any to sell in the many local bazaars, it would surely be ridiculously overpriced or made from something of inferior quality and taste to the good old-fashioned American way. But today was his birthday. Surely, on such a day for celebration, someone on his team would find a way to present him the object of his near carnal desire for. And just as he happened to be walking by in a distressed and anxious manner, the small door to Sniper's van opened, and there stood the rugged Australian leaning against the frame, wearing nothing more than a pair of dusty brown trousers, his familiar hat, and piss-yellow sunglasses. Scout threw him a glance, but one of severe disinterest. Sniper was a disgusting man, or so most speculated. One who never showered nor paid much mind to the finer arts of hygiene, minus dental for some reason. My, but he had spectacular teeth. But despite the fact, he was still a filthy Australian man who collected his own piss in jars, and that made him a disgusting person, even though it was first Saxton Hale who taught him such a skill, and no one ever calls Saxton Hale a disgusting man, ever. Few also ever mention that his name forms a mysterious anagram of hot anal sex, possibly because they will surely be struck dead by the great and all-powerful Mr. Hale if they dare attempt such a public revelation. Oi! Happy birthday, mate! Came the sultry voice from the man in shades when Scout passed. Yeah, hey, thanks! Responded Scout dismissively, though his interest piqued at Sniper, of all people, remembering the glorious day of his birth. Maybe he wasn't such a piss-collecting freak after all. Sniper crossed his arms in front of his chest casually. Got a present for you. At the word present, Scout's attention focused completely on Sniper. What are you? The curiosity, the suspense, far too much for one young man from Boston to handle. He threw himself onto his knees in front of Sniper. You got a present for me? Really? Of course I do. What kind of man would I be if I didn't? Not polite at all to ignore the situation being a co-worker's special day, said Sniper. So it's Scout, hanging on every word. What is it? Begged Scout with clasped hands in desperation for a him or two. Now just hold on, lad. Sniper was slow and easy, deliberate in his mannerisms in contrast to the overzealous Scout. I don't want to just give it away. It would spoil the surprise. Now wouldn't it? Scout couldn't disagree with the notion, but if the man didn't hurry, Scout would surely suffer a hemorrhaging of one or more of his veins from the stress. First you gotta come inside. With that, he beckoned Scout in. Scout eagerly complied. The door shut behind him. "Oh my God! You got me pancakes!" Scout shrieked with all the sheer delight of a prepubescent teenage girl to the thin roof above him. He made an odd noise that can only be described as a bizarre squeeing of some sort. In front of him, Sniper teasingly held a plate stacked with delicious golden fluffies, perfectly topped with a pat of melting butter. Sniper held the now glowing Scout and wandered over to a magazine setting the plate on the table next to a ready and waiting bowl of syrup. He abruptly stepped to the side and gestured toward the rare object of Scout's intense desire. "Have at him, Mike!" Letting out an animalistic shrieking cry, and he enveloped the small table with his body in wild limbs, marching on and tipping up. All items aside from the clock that had been sitting there next to the plate and bottle minding its own business remained well intact. For 1.002 seconds, Scout grabbed the plate and held it in front of him with the syrup bottle, clasped on the other hand, and threw down his skinny ass on the covers of the thick, wet split as a fair amount of the bottle's delightful sugary liquid brown topping was dumped onto the long stack of pancakes in Scout's grab. With a violent bump, 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 Scout began shoveling the contents of the plate into his mouth with complete disregard for any utensils or manners. Plate sitting right under his chin and syrup bottle falling onto the Sniper's cot and leaking slowly. Sniper, wholly unconcerned with the destruction of his property, leaned against the wall and observed the gleeful Bostonite at play with a content smile on his lips. "Thanks so much, Sniper. This is the best birthday ever. You're a great guy. I never believed you were a freak who was into child porn and shit like everyone else said all the time. Not for a second. Dude, you're the best!" Came the flood of gratitude from the Scout's mouth. Only it sounded more like because Scout's mouth was full. Stray pancake crumbs and chunks sprayed out everywhere, littering the cot in his lower half. But only until he took notice of them in his lap and on the sheets below. Then he lowered his face and sucked them up like some foolish humanoid vacuum cleaner. Scout took the plate and licked it clean, so much so that it was indiscernible from one right out of the wash. It shined in what little light there was streaming into the van from the window's glass blinds. The plate of pancakes decimated, Scout searched frantically around for any more traces of crumbs. He could find none, but the syrup bottle was there, and nearly still full. The slim-fingered hands made a quick grab for it, but another hand went in there sooner and lifted it just out of reach. "Pancakes!" Scout chirped, like some sort of humorous 1960s-era Pokemon. The ingested bliss of pancakes throwing his body into a violent and nigh unpredictable sensory overload. His pupils constricted to tiny dots of what Medic could have deemed quite plausible insanity. But Medic wasn't a real doctor, so who gave a shit what he said? "Want more of this, mate? Nice and sugary, innit?" Sniper asked, shaking the bottle in his hand and sloshing the brown ambrosia within against the size and pleasingly sticky drops. Scout's eyes followed it. "Pancakes," uttered Scout in a low and breathy grunt. He inched closer to Sniper, eyes never falling from the bottle of syrup, hands held like the begging paws of a dog and tongue dropping from out of his mouth in a matching gesture. He began to pant, still focusing on the delicious pancakeal accessory, even as Sniper's other hand trailed lower to the fly of his trousers and pulled the zipper down. "Well, come on and get some more," said Sniper in the most erotic voice ever created, pulling out his manly Australian meat rod and pouring generous amounts of syrup onto the leg.
The spider just is camping our spawn, which means there are no teleporters until we pull them to his mouth.
Began circling lovingly, while giving random and wanton grunts of extreme pleasure. In the meanwhile, Sniper's hand clasped to the back of the Bostonite's small head, while he let out his own matching grunts and groans of sexual gratification, all the while making sure the boy didn't get too intense with his devouring. "Oh yeah, mate, that's it. Remember, no teeth, tongue only. Oh fuck yes," moaned Sniper. thrusting his plump, syrupy sausage deep into Scout's hungry little mouth. Scout obliged enough, entirely absorbed in the sucking of the fine coating and heated and refined maple from Sniper's fantastic dong. Roughly 8 minutes of sexy, syrupy sexual shenanigans passed before Scout had destroyed the entirety of Sniper's nightweight machine, and Sniper was on the edge of sensual evacuation of his testes. With a long groan, he expelled in the Scout's mouth, and Scout wasn't that put off since there was still trace amounts of fresh-warmed syrup there to disguise the less appetizing taste of man-made. With his snoodle rapidly becoming lit, Sniper moved to phase 2 of Scout's birthday surprise. Copious amounts of bareback foot sex. Sniper threw Scout down and straddled him, bringing the bottle of syrup back into play. Pancakes! Pancakes! Whimpered Scout, thrashing about beneath the agile Aussie hunter like a wild game just waiting to be gutted. All right, given his peculiar reputation. Quiet, you, ordered Sniper. Here! Sniper gave the bottle a firm squeeze, and sent a stream of dewy, liquefied happiness into Scout's wide-open and desperate mouth. Scout let out a soft gurgle of appreciation as the syrup poured down his throat, filling it and covered his lips and cheeks once maximum capacity had been reached. Scout gulped it down. Oh god, pancakes! I fucking love pancakes! Yes, more! Moaned Scout, bringing hands into the still freely flowing river of goop, gather, and rub all over his supple body. With a sudden frantic fury, he tore away the shirt from his torso to allow the wonderful product to meet his bare flesh. Oh yes, I'm a fucking pancake! Cover me in syrup! Growing hotter by the second, the Bostonite's seductive display of readiness, Sniper poured the syrup further across Scout's slender, exposed torso, his flag back at full mast. Fuck yes, rub it all over here, you little yank wanker! Deft hands stripped away Scout's lower garments, and then he was naked as the day of his joyous birth, when he fell out from between his milf of a mama's legs. The intensity of his rigid boner and the sight of Scout's succulent forbidden fruit drove Sniper into a state of temporary carnal madness, bringing the bottle of syrup over his writhing fuck toy's naughty bits. Sniper unleashed a splatter of the bottle's dwindling contents onto Scout's ass, coating his tender cheeks and small virginal manhole with appropriate lubrication. Then he poured some more onto his angrily thawing schlong. Bottle now empty, Sniper eyed it for a brief second or two to make absolutely sure, then tossed it away where it bounced off something with a hollow plasticky bump. And then he began to steer his baloney pony into Scout's stable. Sniper's was an aggressive grunt of forceful entry as he pushed his sticky snake mischievously into Scout's Garden of Eden. He made it through the hollowed halls and deeper into the dark cabin beyond, the warm syrup helping everything go down very smoothly. Because it is a fine lubricant, and if you don't think so, you're just a jealous bitch from Weeping Cock. Oh! Scout responded, mouth an O of shock, horror, and surprising sexual satisfaction. As the blinding pain of penetration passed over, his body quickly accepted the huge invading organ, even though he had never before this moment had anything larger than several digested burritos pass through his rectum. And that had been in reverse. But he managed to adapt to the sudden offset of anal sex magnificently well. Sniper began to pound Scout's ass with all the ferociousness of an Australian wild bushman, who hadn't had much of a sex life up until then, unleashing loud growls and grunts of manly passion that filled the camper van. The van itself rocked under the force of motion as the two undulated like the crashing waves of the sea. Only instead of waves, it was more like a swarthy, crazed Australian gunman banging the once virginal asshole of a twinkish sugar-craved brat from Boston. And it was beautiful, and somewhere an angelic choir sang on high. The thrusting of male bodies against one another and loud screaming continued on for exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes. And then Sniper had about finished. He came explosively with a sharp gasp of excitement and gushed a massive amount of semen in the Scout's expertly stretched internal tubing system. Like a gallon or something, probably. because I'm not supposed to know how much semen actually comes out of a man's cock after sex. And all here, and I'm going by what I've seen and all the hentai and yaoi mangas I have read in my time, just like everyone else who writes bad internet porn. Still howling with orgasmic fury, Sniper's hot sex juice poured, not spurted, but poured into Scout's battered ass, as the smaller man wriggled beneath him, the sugary mess not yet beginning to thicken and congeal, so there was still time to break free. So he pulled out. And by pulled, I mean wrenched his pecker free of the sticky hole with a violent yet tender growl. Because by sharing physical love for one another, despite being in the form of an awkwardly written rape, Sniper felt a growing love for the younger man. Probably. And also weak and severe pain, possible rectal trauma, and advancing stages of diabetes as he grows older. Scout moaned loudly as Sniper slowly disengaged from within his fudge factory, and he too felt intense love back for the man who had stolen his virginity, but gave him the best birthday present of his life, which was the pancakes, not the anal savagery. "Oh, Sniper," Scout said, blushingly cute, and bringing his wide eyes up to stare into Sniper's. "That was the best birthday present I ever got. I love you. You got a little syrup there on your face, mate," Sniper returned, unemotionally through clenched teeth, in the process of lighting up the cigarette held between the rows. Scout's eyes crossed, his body instantly resuming the state of terrible sugar-high arousal, and he began to quiver with excitement. Scout began, pausing only to suck in a deep breath which exploded from his lungs, bellowing out the word, "Pancake!" And then, in a frenzy of manic glee, he started chewing on his own flesh, tearing off hunks and swallowing, imagining he was in fact the greatest of earthly creations, a pancake. He had at last become that which he longed to be, and was consumed by a feeling of complete nirvana. Sniper sat there at the edge of the cot and stared in mild revulsion and awe, watching Scout eat himself until he was nothing more than a head and awful stump of neck, which was really weird since he ate his own stomach long before making it that far. Rolling from side to side in contentment, the head of Scout burped and grinned wildly, eyes closed, mumbling to himself over and over again, "Pancakes, pancakes, pancakes." He was starting to drip a little blood and matter out onto Sniper.